cloying scent of lemon-scented floor polish and overheated hollandaise sauce was the air Clara Mae Thompson breathed. It was the perfume of her deferred dreams, a constant, sticky reminder of the life she was supposed to have, measured out in the 8-hour shifts at the Gilded Pelican, a Palm Beach establishment that prided itself on its starched linen and its even starchier clientele. At 24, Clara wore her uniform like a suit of armor and a shroud. It protected her from the casual cruelties of the patrons, but it also buried the woman she had once been, a top-tier mechanical engineering student at Georgia Tech, a girl who understood the elegant language of gears and pistons better than she understood gossip or fashion. That life had imploded 3 years ago. A single phone call. Her mother, a librarian with a quiet strength, had suffered a debilitating stroke. The medical bills piled up like sandbags against a rising flood, and her father's modest auto repair shop, a place of sanctuary and learning for Clara, had to be sold to keep them afloat. The world of differential equations and fluid dynamics was replaced by the simple, brutal arithmetic of survival. Engineering schematics gave way to seating charts. Her hands, once stained with the honest grease of a timing belt replacement, were now meticulously clean, trained to balance a tray of champagne flutes and clear away the remnants of $1,000 dinners. No one who saw her, efficient, polite, almost invisible, could ever guess that she could diagnose a misfiring cylinder by sound alone, or that she had once rebuilt the transmission of a 1968 Ford Mustang from scratch with her father. That part of her was locked away, a ghost in the machine of her current existence. "Table 4 needs more bread, Thompson." "Now," hissed Mr. Abernathy, the maitre d', his voice a thin, reedy weapon. "Yes, sir," Clara murmured, her smile a carefully constructed facade. Table 4 was the personal kingdom of Mr. Reginald Harrington, a real estate mogul in his late 50s, with a face permanently flushed from expensive wine and self-satisfaction. He was a restaurant regular and Clara's personal tormentor. Today he was entertaining 2 other men who looked like slightly less successful versions of himself. "And another bottle of the Montrachet," Harrington boomed as she approached, not looking at her but at his guests. "And tell the chef if this Dover sole is a millimeter overcooked, I'll be sending it back to swim home." He punctuated the remark with a flick of his fingers in her direction, a gesture one might use to dismiss a fly. "Of course, sir. Right away," Clara said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. As she navigated the sea of tables, her gaze briefly fell on a woman sitting alone in a quiet corner booth. She was a stark contrast to the loud, preening peacocks like Harrington. Dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored charcoal gray suit, the woman appeared to be in her early 70s. Her white hair was cut in a severe, elegant bob, and her eyes, behind a pair of unadorned glasses, missed nothing. She nursed a single glass of iced tea, her posture radiating an unnerving stillness, a quiet authority that was more potent than all of Harrington's bluster. There was no flashy jewelry, no designer handbag placed ostentatiously on the table, but the very fabric of her suit seemed to absorb the light differently. Clara had seen her a few times before, always alone, always observing. She'd mentally nicknamed her the Iron Owl for her silent, penetrating watchfulness. A sudden commotion near the restaurant's grand entrance pulled Clara's attention. An elderly man, looking utterly lost and distressed, was trying to communicate with Kevin, the young host. The man was dressed in a well-worn tweed jacket, and he clutched a vintage leather car key fob in his trembling hand. He was speaking in heavily accented English, but his panic made the words tumble out in a nearly incomprehensible rush. "Please, my auto, it is kaput," he stammered, his face pale. "It makes a sound, a click, 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 but no brum." Kevin, a college student more interested in his phone than the patrons, stared at him blankly. "Sir, a click? You mean your car won't start? You should probably call a tow truck." From his table, Harrington let out a loud braying laugh. "Sounds like the old fossil's jalopy finally gave up the ghost. What is it? A Model T?" His friends guffawed along with him. The old man's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and frustration. He tried again, this time slipping into his native German, his words now precise and technical, though no one could understand them. Der Anlasser dreht, aber der Motor zündet nicht. Ich glaube, es liegt an der Kraftstoffpumpe oder vielleicht am Verteiler. Whoa, there, Fritz, Harrington called out, standing up and puffing out his chest. He clearly saw an opportunity to perform. He strode over to the man. Let me explain it in simple terms. Your old car is dead. Call a cab. He spoke slowly, as if addressing a child. The German man just looked more crestfallen, shaking his head in despair. Clara felt a hot surge of anger. It wasn't just Harrington's condescension. It was his profound, willful ignorance. It was the casual cruelty of a man who had never had to fix anything himself. And through the old man's panicked German, Clara had heard something that resonated deep within her soul. The starter turns, but the engine won't ignite. I think it's the fuel pump, or maybe the distributor. It was the language of her father's garage. It was the language of her lost life. Something inside her, the part of her that knew the precise, beautiful mechanics of an internal combustion engine, finally snapped. The years of forced smiles and swallowed insults had built a pressure that needed a release. She placed her tray of water glasses on a nearby service stand, wiped her palms on her apron, and walked toward the entrance. The woman in the corner booth, the Iron Owl, lowered her glass of iced tea and leaned forward just a fraction of an inch. Her gaze sharpened, zeroing in on the unfolding scene. Clara stopped in front of the distraught German man and looked him kindly in the eye. Then she spoke. The voice that emerged was not the soft, subservient whisper of a waitress. It was clear, confident, and flowed with a language the room did not expect. Entschuldigen Sie die Störung, mein Herr, she began, her German fluent and technical. Mr. Harrington versteht nichts von Motoren. Sie sagten, der Anlasser dreht? Hören Sie die Kraftstoffpumpe summen, wenn Sie den Schlüssel drehen? Excuse the interruption, sir. Mr. Harrington doesn't understand engines. You said the starter turns? Can you hear the fuel pump hum when you turn the key? The entire restaurant seemed to fall silent. Harrington's jaw hung open, his face turning a blotchy red. His friends stared at Clara as if she had just sprouted wings. Mr. Abernathy, the maitre d', looked horrified. From the corner booth, a single perfectly sculpted eyebrow on the Iron Owl's face rose in appraisal. The German man's eyes widened, then filled with a flood of immense relief. Ja, genau, he exclaimed, gripping her arm. He launched into a more detailed explanation. It wasn't just any car. It was his 1957 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing, a masterpiece of engineering he'd owned for 40 years. He just had it serviced, but the mechanic was new and he suspected something simple had been overlooked. Clara listened intently, nodding. Ein loses Zündkabel vielleicht? Oder ein Wackelkontakt am Verteiler? Das passiert bei diesen alten Zündsystemen oft. A loose spark plug wire, maybe? Or a loose connection at the distributor. That happens a lot with these old ignition systems. She turned to Mr. Abernathy, her voice switching back to a crisp, professional English. Mr. Abernathy, I need 5 minutes. This gentleman needs help. Thompson, you are a waitress. Get back to your tables this instant, he hissed, mortified. With all due respect, sir, right now I'm the only person in this building who can actually solve this problem, Clara said, her voice unwavering. She looked at the German man, whose name she learned was Mr. Schmidt. Kommen Sie, she said gently. Let's take a look. She led the astonished Mr. Schmidt out the front doors, leaving a wake of stunned silence and Harrington's sputtering indignation. Outside, parked brazenly in the valet lane, was the car. It was breathtaking. Silver, sleek, with its iconic upward opening doors, it was a piece of automotive art. A small crowd of valets stood around it, shrugging helplessly. Pop the hood, please, Clara said in English, her mind already working. Mr. Schmidt fumbled with the latch, and she lifted the heavy hood. The engine was a clean, beautiful labyrinth of polished metal. She didn't need tools, not yet. She needed her eyes and her hands. Her fingers, nimble and sure, traced the path of the spark plug wires. They were old, the braided cloth type. She ran her hand along the distributor cap. And there it was. A tiny thing, almost imperceptible. The main coil wire leading into the center of the distributor cap was not seated properly. It was just loose enough to create an intermittent connection. Exactly the kind of simple, frustrating problem that could stump someone who didn't know what to look for. She pushed it down firmly. It clicked into place with a satisfying snap. "Okay, try it now," she told Mr. Schmidt, stepping back. He scurried to the driver's seat, his hands trembling with hope. He turned the key. The engine turned over once, twice, and then erupted into a deep, throaty, perfectly tuned roar. The sound was music. Mr. Schmidt let out a cry of pure joy. He leaped out of the car and enveloped Clara in a huge, heartfelt hug, babbling his thanks in a torrent of German. "Danke, danke, mein Engel. You are an angel, a mechanical genius." Clara just smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes for the first time that day. She felt a profound sense of satisfaction, a reconnection with a part of herself she thought was dead. For a moment, she wasn't a waitress. She was Clara Thompson, the engineer. When she walked back into the restaurant, the atmosphere was electric. The patrons were whispering, staring at her with a newfound respect. Mr. Harrington sat rigidly at his table, his face a thunderous mask of humiliation. He had been upstaged, made to look like a fool by a waitress. She went to his table to refill his water glass, her movements calm and professional. He didn't say a word. When he and his guests finally left, he slapped a few bills on the table for a nearly $2,000 meal. Clara glanced at it later. A $5 tip. A final, petty act of vengeance. She wasn't surprised. What did surprise her was that the woman in the corner booth, the Iron Owl, was also preparing to leave. As she stood, her valet, a man with the discreet bearing of a Secret Service agent, approached the table. The woman spoke to him in a low voice, her gaze fixed on Clara. The valet nodded and walked over to Clara as she was clearing another table. "Excuse me, miss," he said respectfully. "Mrs. Vance asked me to give you this." He handed her a thick, cream-colored envelope made of heavy, expensive cardstock. It bore no name, only a simple, embossed crest on the flap, a stylized V intertwined with a gear. Clara took it, her fingers numb. She watched as the woman, Mrs. Vance, walked out of the restaurant without a backward glance and stepped into a waiting Bentley that purred at the curb like a contented panther. Clara thought that was the end of it, a strange, exhilarating break in the monotony of her life. She had no idea that for her, the engine had just started. The rest of her shift was a hazy dream. The clatter of plates, the endless requests for more water or extra lemon, all of it seemed distant and unimportant. The heavy envelope in her apron pocket felt like a warm stone, a secret source of heat against her hip. She resisted the urge to open it, wanting to wait until she was away from the prying eyes of the gilded pelican. When she finally clocked out, the humid Florida night felt cool against her flushed skin. She didn't go straight to her tiny rented room above a laundromat. Instead, she walked to the nearby seawall and sat on a bench, the sound of the gentle waves, a soothing counterpoint to the frantic beating of her heart. Under the dim glow of an ornate street lamp, she carefully broke the seal on the envelope. Inside, there were 2 items. The first was a check. It was drawn from a private bank she'd never heard of, a personal check, not a corporate one. The signature was a bold, decisive scrawl. Eleanor Vance. The amount written on the check made Clara's breath catch in her throat. $5,000. It was more than she made in 2 months of grueling work. In the memo line, a single word was written: competence. The second item was a letter, handwritten on matching stationery. The script was elegant but strong, the ink a dark, assertive blue. Miss Thompson. I do not believe in luck. I believe in skill. What I witnessed this afternoon was not a waitress helping a tourist. It was a diagnostician solving a problem with an efficiency and grace my own corporate engineers would do well to emulate. Arrogance is common. Competence is rare. You possess the latter in abundance, and it is being criminally wasted. This check is a gratuity for your service. The real purpose of this letter is an invitation. I have a problem, a far more complex mechanical puzzle than a vintage Mercedes. I require a fresh perspective, someone who sees the machine, not just the balance sheet. Be at the main entrance of the Vance Industries Tower, 233 South Wacker Drive, Chicago, this Friday morning at 9 a.m. sharp. A plane ticket has been booked in your name. You will find the confirmation details attached. Your hotel accommodations have also been arranged. Dress for a workshop, not a boardroom. This is not a job offer. It is an assessment. Whether it becomes something more is entirely up to you. Sincerely, Eleanor Vance, CEO, Vance Industries. Clara's hands trembled as she read the letter again, and then a third time. Vance Industries. The name was vaguely familiar. She pulled out her phone, her fingers fumbling as she typed it into the search bar. The results flooded the screen. Vance Industries wasn't just a company. It was a global behemoth of manufacturing and engineering. They built everything from jet engines to deep-sea drilling equipment. They were a titan of the old guard, a legend in American industry. And Eleanor Vance was the dynasty's matriarch, known in business circles as the Iron Lady of the Midwest, a famously reclusive and demanding leader who had tripled the company's value since taking over from her late husband 30 years ago. The letter wasn't a prank. It was a summons from a queen. A dizzying mix of terror and elation washed over her. Chicago, a plane ticket, an assessment. Dress for a workshop, not a boardroom. The words sent a shiver down her spine. This wasn't about her ability to speak German. Mrs. Vance had seen something deeper. She had seen the engineer under the waitress's apron. She stumbled home in a daze, the letter and check clutched in her hand. Her apartment was small and smelled faintly of the fabric softener from the laundromat below. Her mother was in her armchair by the window, a crocheted blanket over her legs, reading a book. Her speech was still slow from the stroke, but her mind was as sharp as ever. "You're late, sweetie," she said, her smile gentle. "Long day?" Clara couldn't speak. She knelt by her mother's chair and laid the check and the letter in her lap. Her mother put on her reading glasses and read the letter slowly, her expression shifting from curiosity to profound astonishment. "Clara May," she whispered, looking at her daughter, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Who is this woman?" "She was at the restaurant today," Clara explained, the whole story pouring out of her. Mr. Harrington, the German tourist, the Mercedes, the loose wire. Her mother listened, her gaze filled with a fierce maternal pride. But it was quickly followed by a flicker of worry. "Chicago. It's so sudden. Clara, you must be careful. Things like this don't just happen. It could be some kind of trick." "I know, Mom. It feels impossible," Clara said, her voice barely a whisper. "But what if it's not? What if it's real?" She looked around the cramped room at the stacks of unpaid medical notices on the small kitchen table. The $5,000 check could pay for 3 months of her mother's physical therapy. But the letter was offering something more valuable than money. It was offering a way back, a chance to be the person she was meant to be. "Harrington left me a $5 tip today," Clara said quietly, looking at her mother. "He wanted me to feel small, and for 3 years I have. I've been letting myself get smaller and smaller every day. This Mrs. Vance, she saw me, the real me." Her mother reached out and cupped her cheek, her hand warm and frail. "Then you have to go," she said, her voice firm. "You have to see what this is. Your father, he would be so proud." The next 48 hours passed in a blur. Clara called the restaurant and quit, leaving a polite but firm message for Mr. Abernathy. There was a sweet, terrifying freedom in saying the words, "I will not be returning." She deposited the check, the bank teller raising an eyebrow at the amount and the unusual signature. She used a portion of it to buy a simple, sturdy pair of work boots, durable denim jeans, and a few plain, practical shirts. The rest she used to pay the most overdue medical bills. Packing was a simple affair. She had no corporate attire, no fancy clothes. She packed what the letter had told her to, clothes for a workshop. When she stood at the gate at Palm Beach International Airport, waiting to board the flight to Chicago, a wave of panic washed over her. She was throwing away the grim security of her life for a cryptic note from a billionaire stranger. She was walking into the lion's den, armed with nothing but a half-finished engineering degree and a hunch. But as the plane took off, climbing high above the manicured green lawns and sparkling blue water of Palm Beach, she didn't feel fear. She felt the exhilarating, terrifying thrill of an engine catching, of a machine roaring to life, her own. The Vance Industries tower was not a building. It was a declaration of power, a shard of black glass and steel that pierced the Chicago sky. It was designed to intimidate, to make one feel small and insignificant. As Clara stood before it, clutching her worn backpack, she felt a tremor of her old insecurity. But she took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked through the revolving doors. The lobby was a cavern of polished black marble and silent, efficient people in expensive suits. She approached the main security desk, her heart thudding against her ribs. "I'm here to see Eleanor Vance. My name is Clara Thompson." The security guard, a formidable man with an earpiece, didn't even look at a list. He simply nodded. "We've been expecting you, Ms. Thompson." Another guard appeared and escorted her to a private elevator. There were no buttons inside. The guard swiped a card and the elevator began a swift, silent ascent. The doors opened not into an office, but into a penthouse apartment that was a masterpiece of minimalist design. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panorama of Lake Michigan and the city below. And there, standing by the window, was Eleanor Vance. She was dressed as simply as she had been in the restaurant, in gray flannel trousers and a black cashmere turtleneck. "Ms. Thompson, you're punctual. I appreciate that," she said, her voice as crisp and cool as the view. She gestured to a chair. "Please sit." Clara sat on the edge of the leather armchair, feeling hopelessly out of place. "Mrs. Vance, thank you for the check and the flight, but I have to admit, I don't understand why I'm here." "You are here, Ms. Thompson, because I have a very expensive, very sentimental problem," Mrs. Vance said, turning from the window. Her eyes were even more piercing up close, the color of a winter sky. "My company employs over 200 of the world's best engineers. They are brilliant with simulations, with computer-aided design, with algorithms. But I find that fewer and fewer of them know how to listen to a machine. They can't diagnose by feel, by sound, by instinct. They have lost the art. I suspect you have not." She walked to a wall that looked like a seamless panel of dark wood. She pressed a spot and a section of the wall slid open, revealing another elevator. "Come with me." Clara followed her into the second elevator, which descended with a low hum. It went down, far past the lobby level, deep into the foundations of the building. The doors opened into a space that took Clara's breath away. It was a workshop, but unlike any she had ever seen. It was pristine, vast, and filled with a stunning collection of vintage machinery and classic cars. A Bugatti Atlantic sat next to a Duesenberg Model J. But in the center of the room, on a raised platform under a bank of bright, clean lights, was something else. It was an engine, but it was an engine unlike any she had ever seen. It was enormous, a radial engine with 12 cylinders arranged in a circle, like a mechanical star. It was made of brass and polished steel, a thing of intricate, almost sculptural beauty. It was clearly old, from the 1930s or 40s, but it was not an aircraft engine. It seemed designed for something else entirely. "This," Mrs. Vance said, her voice softer now, tinged with an unfamiliar emotion, "was my father's folly. He was a brilliant engineer, a genius. He designed this engine in 1938, the Vance's Stellar 12. It was meant to be a new type of engine for luxury automobiles, perfectly balanced, vibration-free, twice as powerful as any V8 of its day. But it had a flaw, a fatal flaw he could never solve." "What was the problem?" Clara asked, her professional curiosity overriding her nervousness. She was already walking toward the engine, her eyes tracing the fuel lines, the complex gearing of the camshafts. "At precisely 3,200 RPM, it develops a harmonic resonance, a vibration that, if allowed to continue for more than 10 seconds, will tear the engine apart. He worked on it for a decade. It broke his heart. After he died, my husband had it preserved and moved here. For the last 50 years, it has been a monument, a beautiful, useless failure. My team has run every computer simulation imaginable. They say the design is inherently unstable. They want to redesign it with modern materials and electronics. They want to gut its soul." She turned and looked directly at Clara, her expression intense. I don't want a simulation. I want a diagnosis. You have this workshop. You have access to every tool, every schematic. You have until Monday morning. Find the flaw. And with that, she turned and walked back to the elevator. My assistant, Mr. Graves, will be outside. He can arrange for food and anything else you require. I will see you Monday at 9. The elevator doors closed, leaving Clara alone in the vast, silent workshop with the ghost of a machine. For a moment, Clara was paralyzed by the sheer enormity of the task. This wasn't fixing a loose wire. This was a legendary engineering problem that had stumped a genius in a team of modern experts. It was an impossible test. Failure was not just an option, it seemed like a certainty. Then she took a deep breath of the cool, machine-scented air. She walked a slow circle around the Stellar 12, her fingers lightly tracing its cold metal skin. It wasn't just a puzzle, it was a conversation waiting to happen. She had to learn its language. Her first 2 hours were spent just looking. She didn't touch a single tool. She studied the original, hand-drawn schematics, marveling at the elegance of the design. Her father had taught her that. Don't just tear into it, Clara May. Look at it. Understand what the builder was trying to do. Every machine tells a story. As she worked, a man in a crisp lab coat entered the workshop. He was in his late 40s with a sour, impatient expression. I'm David Peterson, head of Legacy R&D, he announced, his tone making it clear he considered the title an insult. Mrs. Vance insisted I make myself available to you, though for the life of me, I don't know what she thinks you'll find that my team's terabytes of simulation data haven't already. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Peterson, Clara said evenly, not looking up from a complex gear assembly she was studying. We've proven, mathematically, that the crankshaft counterweights are insufficient to dampen the third-order harmonics at that specific RPM range. Peterson continued, lecturing her. It's a fundamental design flaw. You're wasting your time. Mathematics and reality don't always perfectly align, Clara murmured, more to herself than to him. The comment clearly irritated him. He watched her for another 10 minutes, arms crossed, before leaving with a disdainful sniff. He was a hurdle, another Mr. Harrington in a different suit. She spent the rest of Friday and all of Saturday in a state of total immersion. Mr. Graves had food and coffee silently delivered. She barely slept, napping for short bursts on a cot in a small side office. She methodically, painstakingly, began to disassemble a section of the engine. She measured every part with calipers, checked tolerances, looked for microscopic signs of wear or stress. It was a perfect machine. The craftsmanship was flawless. The computer simulations were probably right. The design itself was the problem. But it felt wrong. Her instincts, honed over years in her father's garage, screamed that she was missing something. On Sunday morning, bleary-eyed and fueled by coffee, she was staring at one of the pistons. It was a thing of beauty, light and perfectly machined. She was cleaning it when her finger caught on something inside the piston skirt, a tiny imperfection. She looked closer with a magnifying glass. It wasn't a flaw in the metal, it was a number, a tiny, almost invisible stamp, 11. She checked another piston. It was stamped with a 4. Her heart began to race. She scrambled to the parts manifest in the schematics. The pistons were all supposed to be identical, but they weren't. She spent the next 3 hours frantically removing and weighing every single piston. Her discovery was shocking. They were not identical. They were balanced in sets. Piston 1 was matched with piston 7, piston 2 with piston 8, and so on. But they were all slightly, minutely different in weight. The differences were tiny, mere grams, but in a high-revving engine, a few grams could be the difference between balance and catastrophic failure. Why would a brilliant engineer do this? It made no sense. It was a recipe for the very imbalance he was trying to solve, a deliberate act of engineering self-sabotage. Unless it wasn't. She closed her eyes, the workshop's cool, still air a balm on her frayed nerves. She forced herself to think not like a modern engineer trained on CAD software and precision milling, but like her father, a man who could coax a tired engine back to life with patience and a deep, empathetic understanding. Don't fight the machine, Clara May, he used to say, his voice thick with the scent of gasoline and wisdom. Listen to what it's trying to tell you. Every rattle, every shimmy, that's its language. The Stellar 12 wasn't speaking in rattles. It was speaking in numbers, in fractions of a gram. This wasn't a flaw. It was a dialect she didn't understand yet. A system so complex, so counterintuitive, that its logic was hidden in plain sight. She looked back at the schematics, her eyes burning from lack of sleep. She scoured every page, every annotation, every faint pencil marking, searching for the key, the one piece of grammar she was missing. And then she found it. It wasn't a bold headline or a circled warning. It was a ghost of a sentence in the margin of the crankshaft assembly diagram, written in an elegant cursive that felt achingly familiar, like the script in her grandmother's old recipe books. The graphite was so faded it was almost invisible. Firing order must match weight distribution pattern. See Appendix C. Her breath hitched. Appendix C. There was no Appendix C in the thick binder of schematics. She checked the digital archives on the workshop's terminal, Peterson's terabytes of data. She ran searches for Appendix, Stellar, Balancing. Nothing. The document was gone, a ghost in the machine's history. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at the edges of her exhaustion. Without that key, the engine was just a beautiful sculpture of unsolvable chaos. Peterson had said they had digitized everything. If it wasn't in the system, it was gone forever. She leaned against the workbench, the weight of imminent failure pressing down on her. She had come so far only to be stopped by a missing piece of paper. She pushed herself away from the bench and began to pace, the soft scuff of her boots the only sound in the cavernous space. Where would a man in the late 1930s, a man of meticulous habits and brilliant, unconventional ideas, keep a document of such singular importance? He wouldn't have just clipped it to the main schematics. It was a secret, the very soul of his design. He would have protected it. Her mind drifted back to her father's garage. It had been organized chaos, but her father had his own systems. He'd tuck critical torque specifications or wiring diagrams into the pages of his well-worn Chilton manuals. Not just any page, but the corresponding chapter, a physical hyperlink between the book's knowledge and his own. It wasn't just storage, it was a conversation with the past. Clara's gaze snapped to the far wall, the glass-fronted bookcase, Eleanor's father's personal library. Her heart began a frantic, hopeful rhythm. She crossed the room, her hands slightly trembling as she slid the glass door open. The books smelled of old paper, leather, and time. They were the classics. Timoshenko's Strength of Materials, Ricardo's treatise on the internal combustion engine, Stadola's Steam and Gas Turbines. She pulled them out one by one, her touch reverent, shaking them gently, flipping through their pages. Nothing. Her hope began to wane, the adrenaline of her earlier discovery draining away, leaving a residue of despair. She was about to give up when her fingers brushed against a spine that felt different. It was thicker, the leather softer, more worn. It wasn't a textbook. It was a large, heavy volume of Leonardo da Vinci's collected notebooks. Of course, a man who designed an engine as art would treasure the work of the ultimate artist-engineer. She lifted the heavy book from the shelf. It felt unbalanced, heavier at the back. With a surge of certainty, she turned to the inside back cover. Tucked into a flat, built-in paper sleeve, a feature of old, high-quality bookbinding, was a single sheet of paper, folded into a neat square. It was brittle, the color of old ivory. As she carefully unfolded it, the graphite and faded ink seemed to drink the light. At the top of the page, the title was written in that same elegant script. Appendix C, Stellar 12, Firing Order and Piston Balancing Key. It was the Rosetta Stone. She laid it on the clean workbench under the bright task light, her hands hovering over it as if it might dissolve. It wasn't just a list of numbers. It was a work of genius, a testament to a mind that saw the world in a different way. The engine was not a standard radial where opposing cylinders fired to maintain balance. Vance's father had invented a radical, non-sequential firing order that spiraled around the crankcase, creating a power delivery so smooth it would be like a turbine. But to counteract the complex forces this order generated, the pistons had to be installed in a specific, non-numerical sequence. their minute weight differences precisely arranged to act as dynamic counterweights. He hadn't built an unbalanced engine. He had built a perfectly balanced one that required a secret symphony to play its tune. Over the decades, some mechanic, probably performing routine maintenance, had disassembled it. Finding the numbered pistons, he would have done the logical, standard, and utterly wrong thing. He would have reassembled it in numerical order, 1 through 12. In a single act of conventional thinking, he had turned a masterpiece into a ticking time bomb. Clara sank onto a stool, the yellowed paper held gently in her hands. The silence of the workshop was no longer empty. It was filled with the ghost of a brilliant man, and she felt a profound, heart-aching connection to him. He had lost his dream not to a flaw in his genius, but to a simple lack of communication across time. When the elevator doors hummed open at precisely 9:20 a.m. on Monday, Clara didn't flinch. She was sitting calmly beside the partially disassembled engine, the 12 pistons laid out on a clean white cloth in a strange, nonlinear pattern. The yellowed paper from the book lay beside them. Eleanor Vance entered first, her posture as straight and unyielding as a steel girder. David Peterson followed a step behind, a thin, triumphant smirk playing on his lips. He carried a tablet, ready to present his data-driven condemnation. "Well, Ms. Thompson," Mrs. Vance said, her voice a cool, neutral instrument. "Your time is up. Report." Clara took a slow breath, feeling a calm she hadn't known in years settle over her. The waitress was gone. The frightened student was gone. She met Mrs. Vance's gaze. "Mr. Peterson was right," she began. The smirk on Peterson's face widened. He took a half step forward, ready to interject. "As I told you, Mrs. Vance, the simulations were conclusive. He was right that the engine, as it stands, is fundamentally unstable," Clara continued, her voice cutting cleanly through his. "His simulations correctly predicted that the assembly would tear itself apart at 3,200 RPM. Peterson's expression shifted to one of smug vindication. "So, you've spent 48 hours confirming what my team proved in 30 minutes? A fascinating use of company resources." "However," Clara said, her voice dropping slightly, drawing them in, "the simulations and Mr. Peterson were operating under a false premise." She stood and gestured to the engine. "They assumed they were analyzing the original design. They were not. They were analyzing a mistake." She picked up the yellowed paper, holding it with the care one would afford a sacred text. "For 70 years, everyone has believed this engine had a fatal flaw. It doesn't. It has a secret." For the next 10 minutes, the workshop became her classroom, her theater. She didn't just explain, she demonstrated. She explained the discovery of the weighted pistons, the frantic, near-hopeless search for the missing appendix, the moment of revelation within the pages of Da Vinci's work. She then walked them through the genius of the design, using the pistons on the cloth as visual aids. "You see," she explained, pointing to the paper and then the pistons. "Cylinder 1 doesn't fire opposite cylinder 7. It fires, then cylinder 4, then 9, then 2. It's a spiral. The creator designed this seemingly chaotic firing order to eliminate vibration at the source. But to make it work, the assembly itself had to be a part of the balancing act. Piston 1, the lightest, goes in this cylinder. Piston 8, its heavier partner, goes over here. They aren't fighting a vibration, they are composing a harmony." He was dynamically tuning the reciprocating assembly in 1938, using nothing but a precision scale and a pencil. Peterson had gone pale. He took the paper from Clara's outstretched hand, his own trembling slightly. He stared at the complex firing order, the corresponding piston weights. The smirk was gone, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. He looked from the paper to the engine, to the pistons on the table, his mind clearly racing, rerunning decades of assumptions. "My God," he whispered, the sound swallowed by the vast room. It's perfect. It's a mechanical fugue. We've been trying to solve this problem with variable valve timing and active engine mounts controlled by microprocessors. He did it with physics, pure physics." Eleanor Vance had not moved. Her gaze had been locked on Clara throughout the entire explanation. The icy reserve in her eyes had not just melted, it had evaporated, replaced by something fierce and bright. It was not just admiration, It was recognition. "You didn't just find the flaw, Miss Thompson," she said, her voice low and resonant. "You rescued a legacy. You listened to the story when everyone else was just reading the numbers." She turned her sharp gaze to Peterson, who visibly flinched. "Mr. Peterson, you and your team of data analysts will reassemble this engine. You will do it under Ms. Thompson's direct and sole supervision. Every bolt will be torqued to her specification. I want to hear it run by the end of the month. Am I understood?" "Yes, Mrs. Vance," Peterson said, his voice humbled. He looked at Clara, and for the first time, she saw not condescension, but a dawning, grudging respect. Eleanor turned back to Clara. The brief, almost imperceptible softening of her features was gone, replaced by her usual crisp efficiency. "The assessment is over. My car will take you to your hotel. Be ready at 6 p.m. We will discuss your future over dinner." Dinner was not at a gilded, crowded restaurant. It was in the penthouse, the city of Chicago, a glittering tapestry of light laid out on 108 floors below. A table had been set near the vast windows. The meal was simple, elegant, and served by a silent attendant, who then disappeared. For a long while they ate in a comfortable silence. Finally, Eleanor Vance placed her fork down and looked at Clara. "My father died believing he was a failure," she said, her voice devoid of its usual corporate steel, now possessing a quiet, personal timbre. "He poured his fortune and the last decade of his life into that engine. When it failed, it broke him. My husband, a practical man, saw it as a folly, a monument to hubris. He had it preserved as a cautionary tale. I never knew what to think. Until today." She paused, her gaze lost for a moment in the city lights. "When you spoke in the workshop, I didn't just hear an engineer. I heard him. That same spark, that refusal to accept the obvious answer, that passion for the machine's hidden poetry. My company has hundreds of brilliant minds. They build the future, but we have forgotten how to listen to our past." She leaned forward, her eyes locking with Clara's. "I am creating a new division at Vance Industries. I'm calling it the Skunk Works Division, after the old Lockheed term. Its mandate will be to solve the impossible problems, to look at our most challenging legacy projects, our most ambitious failures, and find the forgotten genius. It will operate outside the normal corporate structure. It will have its own budget, its own labs, starting with my father's workshop, and it will answer to no one but me." She let the words hang in the air. "I want you to build it and to run it." Clara felt the air leave her lungs. The scale of the offer was so immense it seemed to bend the reality of the room around her. "The title will be Executive Director," Vance continued, as if discussing a routine line item. "Mr. Peterson will be reassigned to your division. He is brilliant, but his arrogance is a liability. You will teach him humility, or you will fire him. The choice will be yours. A corporate apartment, 2 blocks from this building, has been prepared for you. Your salary will be of a magnitude that will render your mother's medical bills an afterthought. We will have the finest geriatric care specialists in the country flown to Florida for a consultation, and we will handle her relocation to Chicago whenever you and she are ready. We will also, of course, fund the completion of your degree and any subsequent degrees you wish to pursue at the university of your choice." It was a life raft. No, it was an ocean liner, offered to a woman who had been treading water for 3 years. It was the restoration of everything she had lost, and the promise of a world she had never dared to dream of. "There is a condition," Mrs. Vance added, her voice regaining its sharp edge. "I am not offering you a job, Miss Thompson. I am offering you a battlefield. The corporate world is not a meritocracy. It is a hierarchy. You are young. You are a woman. You are an outsider with a half-finished degree. There are 100 vice presidents in this company who will believe your position belongs to them. They will undermine you. They will challenge you. They will wait for you to fail. I am opening the door for you and giving you a suit of armor, but the fight will be yours alone, every single day." Clara looked out the window at the endless grid of lights, a universe of human ambition and struggle. She thought of the cloying smell of hollandaise sauce, of the weight of a heavy tray, of Mr. Harrington's contemptuous face as he dropped a $5 tip for a $2,000 meal. She thought of the grit under her fingernails in her father's garage, a feeling she had missed more than she had ever admitted. She had been fighting her whole life, against poverty, against grief, against the quiet death of her own spirit. The fight Mrs. Vance described didn't scare her. It sounded like coming home. She turned back to face the Iron Lady of the Midwest. A genuine smile, the first she had truly felt in years, touched her lips. Her voice when she spoke was not the whisper of a waitress or the uncertain tone of a student. It was calm, clear, and steady, the voice of a director. "I understand, Mrs. Vance," she said. "I'll need access to the full digital archives and the original schematics for the T-77 turbine compressor first thing in the morning. I saw the failure analysis reports in the system. I think they've been asking the wrong questions."